Hi there everyone, and welcome back to Station Road. Now you're probably all wondering where I've actually been and what is with all the radio silence, as I was regularly putting up a video at least once a week, and I think it's now been 3 weeks since I put up a video. And I'll give you guys a little bit of a breakdown of what's been happening in my corner of the world over the last 5 months. And this sort of ties in with the odd video that was in bizarre locations, for example railway stations or caravans. So I'll try and make this as brief as possible, because also as part of this video I'll finish off what I had started some weeks back, a video into couplings. So I'll finish that video off and put that on at the end of this video. And I think kind of pointing it in a way, couplings as in connections with wagons, and in order to make up a family of wagons, in other words a train, and also what's been happening in my life in terms of connections. So yeah, the reason being the radio silence is just recently, about 2 weeks ago, my father passed away, and although it wasn't an untimely passing, he was 85, nearly 86 years old. He suffered some strokes at the end of last year, and he continued to suffer further strokes throughout the last 5 months, and so there's sort of been a gradual decline. Now my parents don't live in the same city I live in, so it's meant a lot of travelling, a lot of air flights, a lot of motel bookings, and it's been a long road. And I don't know what to say. In other words, really, to say that it's a connection lost, unfortunately. And so I guess I'll leave you with this wee poem, actually, which interestingly my son Caleb wrote, and I think it is probably one of the most prophetic poems that I've ever heard. So I'll leave you with this, and at the end of that we'll get into some couplings and making connections with Kadees. So this is what my son wrote, and he also read this out during the funeral. So, what do you say to someone you love but have lost? With a heavy heart, subtle sorrow, you could say you will miss them, miss their wit, compassion, their everlasting care. You could recall shared memories, memories of old and new, memories of fun and laughter, debates and discussions, memories of importance to you. You could commemorate their life, remember with pride and pain the person they were, husband, father, brother, grandfather, a fascinating and wise man. You could go on and on and on again. But when it comes to the end and you have lost your words, sometimes the best thing to say is that you love them forevermore. So some thoughts and news from this end of the world, and I think 2020 is proving to be quite the year, also with lots of other things going on, as we know, the coronavirus and all sorts of stuff. But aside from all that, I think one of the things that is common amongst a lot of people to, in other words, keep people going and keep the energy and the motivation and so forth going, and that is model trains. So we will switch over now to this video. Now I'll apologize because I started recording this video about over 3 weeks ago, and so it's in a few bits and bobs, and then I finished off a few final tail end pieces today. So there's a bit of a flick around between different scenes, so bear with me. It's also a long video, so and that is basically to make up for the last 3 weeks of not having a video. So I will see you at the end, and I hope you get something out of this particular episode. Cheers. Alright, so these are the wagons that I'm just going to have a go at with the couplings, and there's a variety of makes and also brands here. So we have a Bachmann livestock wagon here. This is a Daypole van. That is a Hornby van, and we have a Bachmann tanker, and I think that is Bachmann, yeah, that's a Bachmann brake van. So this should be enough to demonstrate quite a sort of variety of issues that we have with couplings and coupling heights and so forth. So we'll take a closer look at these. So the interesting thing is, I mean, most of the Bachmann you'll see have the NEM pocket, which is then simply a wedge shape pocket that can actually be also slid out. Then we have Daypole, and Daypole is different again. You'll see here it's screwed in to the underframe. Once again, a NEM pocket. Now the interesting thing about these ones is if you look there, they drop down. So this here, there's too much slack in it vertically, so that's going to cause an issue. So we'll sort of go through the process of how to fix that so it is not loose like that, because that will not be satisfactory. Well, it's not even satisfactory for these couplings, let alone for a Kadee coupling. So that's the Daypole wagon. And then we have a separate issue again with this particular Hornby box van. It has a completely different system, because when I bought this as a pack of 3, and I think this is from the railroad range, it of course had the huge D-lock couplers, and which as we all know, are hideous. So I replaced them with these narrow couplers, but the actual system, if I can take one of these out, is a completely different system. So it's not a NEM pocket at all. I think it's just one of Hornby's own proprietary systems, and whether it's just for these particular vans or whether there's other rolling stock that use this type of system. But in other words, it's completely useless in terms of trying to put a Kadee coupling in here. So this particular van, this is going to go through quite a reasonable amount of modification in order to get some Kadees onto it, because the couplings themselves that I replaced, which are Hornby couplings for this, they're hopeless anyway, because they're too tight. Like the plastic moulding that this clips into, it just stays up. So that I haven't been able to run these at all, because they're just, you can't couple anything with those. So that's that. Then we have, I believe that's Bachmann. So Bachmann, once again, their system seems to be pretty similar. Once again, it is that wedge shape NEM pocket that slides in. They're okay, but occasionally they actually just fall out. They're not that brilliant, really. But we'll see how that goes. Just using the current NEM pockets for that. And this should be the same. And one of these buffers is loose. I'm just got to be careful though. Don't. Oh, there he is. Yeah. We'll just make sure that doesn't fall on the floor. and once again a similar system. Right, just to demonstrate, here is the Daypole van next to the Bachmann livestock wagon, and you can see there, see how the Daypole coupling, including the NEM pocket, droops down, and of course it's sitting at least a whole coupling thickness below the Bachmann coupling. So as you can see, you know, we're going to encounter issues already in terms, particularly in terms of the Daypole wagons. So if we zoom in, you can just see how much of a difference you've got there in the height. So if we take this one off, and here is the Hornby coupling. Now just to demonstrate, I've actually got the hook raised up, and the hook doesn't drop down. Now, yeah, I could probably, you know, drill out the hole that clips into the plastic lug a little bit more to loosen it up, but you know, to think that they send this out of the factory like this and it's meant to drop on its own weight is pretty average. So they're useless. But the height's different again, you see. So the height of the Hornby is actually now at the same height as the drooped Daypole coupling. So, you know, we've got differences in height all over the place. So it's going to be quite interesting in terms of working out different heights. So we'll start seeing what we can achieve with these Kadee couplings. Now, I've got a couple of different options here in terms of couplings. We have, I've bought two different types. So we've got the number 18, which is a slightly shorter drawbar length. Then we have some 20s, depending on, you know, this is a long, extra long. So that I believe might be, the 20s might work with some of the locomotives, but we're not going to look at that today. So I don't think I'll be using 20s today. And we also have some 19s. So that's in between. So you've got medium long and extra long. So there's also on the right is a Bachmann EasyMate coupling, and you can see the clasp or the clamp or claw is the same, and it does actually hook up together. I have tested it. The interesting thing is though is that the Bachmann actually has a much less intrusive drawbar or NEM plug on it, but I'm not quite sure whether the magnetic bar underneath is actually metal, because the Bachmann one is all plastic, so I'm not quite sure how well it'll work. So anyway, we'll get on and we'll actually just try and get some of these hooked up and see how it goes. So we're going to look at the Daypole wagon first. Now I've taken the wheels off, and I've taken one coupling off at one end. So this is what we're looking at in terms of the coupling system. So it's screwed on, and it has got this sort of, you know, very slack NEM pocket. So my thoughts were to, in order to tighten this up a bit, would be to file this wee plastic plug that the screw goes into, to file that down a little bit, which will then actually bring the screw down onto the whole pocket and make it a little bit firmer. So I've already filed a little bit off the top of this, and we're just going to put it back together and actually just see how it goes. There's our pocket installed back on now. That it's now not drooping, whereas you can see at the other end, you can see that drooping down, and at that end it's not, it's now level. So definitely think filing down that wee screw socket is worth a go. So anyway, we'll do the other end. Right, so we've got those adjusted now so they don't droop down. So we'll get these the wheels back on, we'll put these Kadees on, and then we'll do a test with one of these. So this is a height gauge for the Kadee couplers, so this will determine the correct height for all couplings on all my wagons. And that's at the perfect height. That's really good. There we have it. So if we connect that, and that locks in perfectly, and the little metal curved bar that protrudes out underneath should pass just over the top of that metal flange that's poking out, and we have a good height on this coupling. So that's that wagon there. Now let's we'll move on to a Barkman wagon and see if we can get these all at the same height. We'll try this and we'll see how it goes. These aren't so bad in terms of their vertical movement. They're sort of reasonably okay in terms of that. So we'll see how it goes, and hopefully these might be at the same height. Now that's interesting. Yeah, see, we can't use the I can't use the 18 on this wagon because the coupling is colliding with a hook that protrudes from the buffer beam. So I don't know whether you can see that. You can see that wee hook coming out of the buffer beam, and the Kadee is actually just well and truly colliding with that. So the 18 coupling is definitely out, and you can sort of tell really that it's going to be out because it's well back from the actual buffers, so that would just make for a coupling that's far too tight. So we'll have to go maybe the 19, possibly even a 20 on this particular wagon. So we'll see what happens. Right, that just clears the hook on the buffer beam. You can just see there's a bit of clearance now. So we'll go with that. We'll try the 19 and see what happens. So we'll see how we're going for height on this one. And we have a problem. As you can see here, we have a height issue. We're looking quite a considerable difference in height. So this one is too high. So that is a problem. So essentially with this one here, the NEM pocket is going to have to come down lower. I might just try turning this upside down and putting in the other way around. Right, so we've got this around the other way. And it's made the smallest amount of difference, but it's still really not satisfactory at all. It's too high. I mean, it does connect, but it really should be level. It kind of works, but we'll get this dipole on here, but we're not getting a full 100% connection, and it's sort of I mean, it might be okay, but it's really is too high, and you're only really clamping half of the coupling, which, you know, going over points or anything like that, that could just break away. So we'll just well, what I'm going to do is I'll just put this one aside for a second, and we'll get another Bachmann. So this is also Bachmann, and the cattle wagon. We'll just see whether we're going to end up with the same problem. And I think, what have we got here? We have the Bachmann brake van as well. So we'll actually have a go at both these Bachmanns now. So if Bachmann is consistently too high, then it'll be a case of working out a system. And we'll turn this one upside down as well. This one has actually much more significant offset in the hole. So if you can see there, you can see there's quite a considerable offset. So this one here, turning this one upside down, might actually make a more significant difference. So see, essentially by turning it upside down, we now have the thicker side of the NEM pocket on the underside of the wagon, and the thinner side is at the bottom. So effectively what that's done, it has actually dropped the height of the coupling down just simply by turning this NEM pocket upside down. So we'll just see how this goes. Well, that's actually a lot better, and that is probably acceptable enough in some respects. You know, it's still not perfect. It's still probably, what are we talking? Probably a millimetre too high, whereas before it would have been at least 2, possibly 3 mils too high. That is definitely better than the tank wagon. So if we just grab our daypole wagon, which we know is actually at the correct height, it is better, but it's still not ideal. So yeah. So the Bachmann wagons, I believe, are really actually going to be a bit of an issue. I think in all of them, they're all going to have their own individually adjusted heights, because obviously what it's come down to is actually that the Bachmann couplers are actually all at different heights. So we'll give this brake van a go as well, and just see what happens with this. Oh, that's interesting. That is just catching on that plate below there, but it's actually very close. So that's interesting, actually. Funnily enough, actually, this brake van is a more recent Bachmann model. The tank wagon and the cattle wagon. I know the cattle wagon is actually quite an old model, and also the tank wagon's quite old as well. So this is more recent. I know that I think I might have actually bought this brand new. So it's a more recent model. Maybe Bachmann have actually improved their game on coupling heights. So that's actually quite interesting. Now, to me, that's really spot on. The only thing is, the interesting thing is, it's like that the bar underneath is catching slightly, but I could adjust that because I believe it actually just needs a bit of curving up. So with a gentle nudge with some pliers, I'm sure I'd be able to just sort of gently bend this up a little bit, potentially. But that is really only the required clearance that it wants to have when it's going over such things as points and so forth. But if we bring in the daypole wagon, And yeah, that's spot on. Right, so the brake van works. I'm going to have to go back, and I'll do this in a separate video, I think, because otherwise this will get too long, is work out what the best solution is to adjust the height of these NEM pockets on these older Bachmann wagons. So we will do that in another video. So let's get on to what I believe will actually be the trickiest one, because unfortunately, and this is Hornby, it's from the railroad range. It was a pack of 3 box vans that I bought, and these are newish models, but of course they're completely non-standard. There's no NEM pocket there, so we can't use, unless I glue a NEM pocket on there, we can't actually use the Kadee NEM couplings, because it's just you know, if I pull this out, and these couplings, as I mentioned earlier, they're terrible. So you know, that's the weird looking shape coupling, which I believe only Hornby make. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then these you know, weird sort of plugs in underneath here. So what I've done is actually got a wagon that I've already pulled taken the wheels off, and we've pulled the plugs out, and as you can see, we've got this sort of weird knobby thing poking out at the bottom. So my plan is to simply actually cut that whole thing off, and I've thought of maybe gluing or screwing on some of these. Now these are Kadee couplers number 3, and it's a complete set, so it's the coupler plus the box. So these you would normally see on HO model rolling stock, but this may be the solution, which is just essentially just put in one of these boxes, and I'd either screw or I might just glue one on and see how it goes. So we'll give this a go now, and hopefully it works. Right, so we've filed that down. You know, I'm not too fussed about this. Looks a bit rugged, but I'm sure it'll be fine. Now we're just going to try this coupling now. I'm probably going to say that it'll need some packing in underneath it to drop the coupler down. So, but we'll just see what happens. Now this is the wee coupling. It is a number 3, I believe. So it's a complete unit. So and you get 4 in a pack. It's the little whisker versions. So so it's not a NEM system at all. This is what's used on, I think, HO stock. There is a hole going through here, so there is a potential to screw this on the underside of the frame, but there's also, I mean, you could essentially just glue it as well, I guess. The actual box component is plastic, so but we'll just sort of figure out what we're looking at in terms of height. There we go. You can just see how far out we are. So in terms of this is what we sort of need to get some packing. Now I'll have to make something up to fit under there and see how it goes. Now the other thing too is I've got to consider the screw. If we use a screw hole, where is that going to end up? And I believe it's actually going to end up in the wee recess that's actually in under here. So I think screwing it in, unfortunately, is not an option, because you can see here there's actually a recess, and then of course on the other side is a metal weight located in there, unless I actually drill through that metal weight and screw into that. So yeah, a little bit of fiddling around to get this one going, but we'll be back with some bits of plastic and so forth to give it a shot. So change of scenery now. We're now back at Station Road and we're 3 weeks on, but continuing with the dilemma I have with the Hornby wagon couplings. So continuing on, right where we left off, I have now sourced a piece of plastic to drop the height of the Kadee coupling box a little bit further down, and you might be able to see there I've basically put an entire strip of black plastic on the underside of the frame, and it is basically a strip of black plastic from an ice cream container, and this is roughly about 1 mil thick, this plastic, and by my calculations this is the ideal amount to drop the coupling box down by. So I have super glued this onto here, onto the underframe, and I'm actually going to see whether I can actually screw the Kadee box into the plastic that I've glued on here by drilling a wee hole. So we're going to give this a go now and put some wheels back on and just see how we go with the height. If the screwing the box on doesn't work, then I will simply just glue the box on and see how that goes instead. So let's get to it and see how this goes. Right, so I've taken a wee shortcut. I did try screwing these in, and well, it just turned into a bit of a mess really because the glue hadn't dried properly. It pulled the plastic up. And so I've now switched glues to a different glue, a Zap glue, which is I actually prefer, and I've just basically glued the coupling boxes onto the underframe. So if you can see there, it's not overly tidy, but I'm not that fussed about it because generally, really, at the end of the day, you're not going to see it. So they are glued in there. So now the moment of truth is going to come. I put the wheels back on this, and let's just hope that I calculated the coupling height correctly. So we'll just pop the wheels back on. And the moment of truth. It's possibly just a tad on the low side, because that is similar to what it did for the brake van. I'll just zoom in a bit. It hits the... I'll just turn this around actually so you can see it from this side. That just clips the bottom of that. Now that's supposed to sort of glide just over the top of it. So, but it's pretty close. It's possibly just slightly on the low side, but if I hadn't included the bit of ice cream container plastic in between, it would have actually been too high. So I think that actually works out pretty well. So I might just, I'm just going to quickly get the pliers and bend that little curved bar up a little bit and take it from there. Right, so we've now just curved that bar up just a smidgen. I guess the other thing I could have done is maybe I could have actually just clipped a little bit off the end of the bar. Yeah, so the bar itself, of course, that is what's used because they're magnetic uncouplers, so that's what's used to actually uncouple them. But yeah, it's just slightly lower than the gauge. Yeah, there we go. So that covers it for the couplings in regards to the daypole and some of the barkman. Of course, as you have seen, we had issues with the some of the other barkman couplings. So the only barkman coupling that actually worked out well was the brake van, which we have here. So that came in quite nicely. But these ones here, so the stock wagon, I turned the NEM pocket upside down, and that sort of dropped it down a little bit, and it might be okay, but we did have much greater issues with the tank wagon, which is really too high, and I'll do a separate video on these ones here, and they have that wedge shape coupling. You see I've turned that NEM pocket upside down, but even then that still hasn't made a great deal of difference. So I will look at this in another video. The only other one actually I just thought, which I didn't actually include initially, and because I'd already actually done a version of it, was this wagon here. We'll just zoom out a bit. Is this livestock wagon, which is an Oxford rail wagon, and I'd put now the Oxford rail wagons use basically exactly the same system as Bachmann. So they have the wedge-shaped NEM pocket that slides in. You know, as we can see with the Oxford rail, and this is with no modifications whatsoever, it's just simply take the D-lock coupling out, put the Kadee in, and it just works straight out of the box, and it's at the right height and everything. So the Oxford rail wagon actually works very well. And there is one other wagon here that I also did, and this is actually another daypole. And of course this is, you know, I had the problems with the daypole wagons with their slack couplings, but the interesting thing is actually on this particular wagon they're actually okay. They're nowhere near as loose, so it must have been just, maybe it could have been this particular product run for these wagons, but which I had to modify. I had to file down a little bit of the plastic lug that the screw goes into to tighten up the fitting, whereas the ones on this iron wagon, they're actually okay. They're not. They don't have nearly the slack, nor do they droop. They don't droop down like the cattle wagon. Sorry, the box van, daypole box van did. So, but looking at the height on these, you see once again that's a perfect height. So it's interesting to sort of note that not only is there variations between different brands, but there's also variations within one brand. Yeah, and I think it's just a case of the special requirements for each and every one. So yeah, but I hope you found it useful, and like I said, I will do a video for some of these awkward height issues, particularly on the Bachmann stock wagon, and take it from there. So apologise for the length of this video. It is quite long, but then I did think, well, it's been 3 weeks, so a juicy video was on the cards, and I'm sure that you'll all have plenty of time as well to watch it, considering we are all in some form of lockdown. So I'll leave it there. Thank you everyone for watching, and please don't forget to subscribe and comment as well, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.